Of all target free, I'm starting to start. Okay.
Am I audible? It's okay if I don't open my camera.
Nice company.
Hello.
Yeah, you're already cool.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jay. Pronouns are she, her. Here I see chat. All right. starting my starting my speech in three, two, one. The more you heroize these non-radical and elitist heroes, the more you stray away from the problems that are at hand that should be discussed because they're far more important than what these people have done. Before I get into my 2 points of constructives, a few pieces of setup. Firstly, what does this narrative look like? This narrative basically looks like a lot of wealthy individuals or a lot of privileged individuals in the past being praised because they're the people who are deemed to have defended the whole entire nation from colonizers, like Jose Rizal defending the entire Philippines from Spaniards. But secondly, then, how does this narrative look like then, or how does this narrative manifest? This looks like when you overly glorify them to an extent, or you don't at all focus on the flaw done. So, for instance, you're not going to be talking about Jose Rizal having an affair with a bunch of women. Instead, you're just going to be focusing on the fact that he wrote two novels that were widespread during the time of the Spanish colonization era. But furthermore, you're going to integrate this in curriculums. You're going to integrate this in school. This is going to be part of the education system. Furthermore, this is going to be deeply rooted in society than in culture, where everyone has a mutual understanding that this person is our national hero, which then means you overglorify them in an everyday instance, insofar as you recognize them as a national hero. What then is a counter model, right? Instead of heroizing them to a horrendous extent when you overly glorify them, you're also going to be focusing on their flaws. Note how in the current curriculum we do not focus about the problems that happened during Jose Rizal's time because we were so focused about the two novels that he wrote. More on that later. But furthermore, this also shed light on the vast majority of individuals who also helped like
POI.
this decolonization happen. So this also looks like shedding light on Lapu Lapu, the fact that he helped the vast majority of individuals to be able to actually escape from the attack of Magellan. You don't see that being heroized because rarely do you talk about it. And even if you do, you don't spend as much time talking about it as compared to Cesar. But then are my two arguments, right? Firstly, on how this shifts the narrative to the real problem at hand. Note that the frame of this is simple. Heroizing these individuals puts a greater emphasis on focus on them, which then means you are likely to ignore the harmful acts that they've done. This is round winning because we're going to prove to you why, absent this heroization, you talk about the real problems at hand, you're better able to get the reparation that you actually need from these colonizers, and why it's going to be far better for the individuals who are actually victims or the people who are living in that country today. What is the premise, right? Firstly, we already told you that when you put a spotlight on them, you're less likely to actually talk about the harms that they did or that they've done. How is this true? This straight is from the issue, right? So, for instance, in the Japanese colonization, when
POI.
Douglas MacArthur, you're less likely to actually talk about the vast majority of families who are affected and still continually affected today. Why is that true? Because when you heroize someone, you're likely to just focus on the act that these individuals are actually better able, or actually were able to actually just like rise to the problem and was resilient after all. You are not likely to get the reparations you get today. Up to this point, Filipinos are having a very hard time getting reparations from the Japanese colonization because they think that is lacking. They think that their families are not compensated for the mass genocide that was occurred during that time. This is all because you already glorify in schools that the Filipinos were able to be resilient and to be able to stand up from the challenges. You're not actually able to get or lobby for the reparations that you want because people are likely to ignore it in the very first place. On the comparative, then, you talk about it more. You talk about the effects of colonization. What this then looks like is you're better able to actually talk about the reparations that you need. So, for instance, your family was a victim of the colonization beforehand. You're not able to talk about it now because everyone has that idea that we've already risen from it, when in reality, it's still deeply rooted in our culture. Why do we praise colonizers more than we our own like products, for instance? This is something that we ignore because we think that this is a problem that we already had the solution to, when in reality, we don't actually have a solution to those things at hand. When you actually focus on the problems that actually happened during that time, when you actually focus on the harms that occurred, instead of painting it as if you have a hero who already solved everything for you, instead of painting it as if you already had a hero who was able to take away the 300 years of colonization, you're not able to actually shed light on the important issues that are still occurring today. How are you better able to get reparations? Better able to get that under our side. Moreover, when you talk about this, you
POI.
a greater change in terms of perception. You have less people, for instance, who have this like mentality that is so incredibly harmful. When you talk about what they actually did and the horrors that these individuals have actually done, you're likely for people to be more proud of your own culture. People are going to be more happy. People are going to be more willing to demand the reparations that they need because they see that this is not actually a problem that we should not ignore, and that the harms that happened in the past still occur today, that not a single hero was able to save the irreversible damages that happened from the very, like even from 100 years ago. Before I continue on my second argument, I'll take a POI from CG or CO, sorry.
When Gandhi is heroized in India for being a non-radical independence fighter, while a majority of discourse focuses on his contributions to the freedom movement, there's still coverage of personal flaws such as the relationships he was in, so that most people know of it. Why can there not be a highlighting of harms then?
We think that it's incredibly harmful because in the context of colonization, right, you're not likely to get the reparations that you need, especially in times when you're overly glorifying this person. You're not likely to talk about why, like the demands that you otherwise need to have. This is a very important principle because the reparations that you need are irreversible because the harms that have been done when you were colonized are irreversible. It literally dictates to what you do today or like how you're interacting with other people. It literally dictates the mindset that you have today. And it also means like you also like have lost a lot of family members beforehand, which is like incredibly harmful for you because you're not able to get the compensation that you probably need. You're only better able to get that under our side. We then tell you that this is the most important argument in this debate because you actually cater to the vulnerable individuals who are most affected by the colonization that happened, regardless of whether or not it happened today or 300 years ago. Second argument then on the discussion of the privileges of these like heroes, right? We tell that this is incredibly harmful because the reason why these individuals are prominent in the first place is because of the wealth that they have, because of the image that they already retained even from that moment on. When you overly glorify them, even if you have people who discuss those harms, what's still going to happen is their prominent image is still going to be that they're super helpful, or like they're the reason why we're still living today or why democracy still lives on. I don't understand why that's important. We tell that this is bad because when you teach this in schools, you're teaching impressionable young children. When you tell them that elitism is bad, when you tell them that these individuals, like for instance, Jose Rizal, when he like wrote like two novels, for instance, instead of you actually focusing on the harms that the Spaniards have done to the Filipinos, you're just focusing on the two novels that he did and the characters that he made instead of the actual problem at hand. Why is this then incredibly harmful? You're not teaching young children or the people what values they should possess and should not. They idolize someone, they idolize this particular hero. They think that this hero is all around. This is someone that they should emulate from the very moment that they like from the moment that they grow up to be patriotic individuals. This is incredibly harmful because this overshadows also a lot of these sketchy things that happened in the past. Like for instance, when Jose Rizal wrote those two novels, he also blamed the vast majority of Filipinos who died simply because they had the copy of that and they had to burn all of it. You think that this is incredibly harmful because you don't talk about those people. You don't talk about that in school because what people want you to do or what the education system wants you to do is to be able to emulate this person, for instance, and you're not going to just gain empathy to the vast majority of individuals who lost their lives. The impact of this is simple. You show individuals or you show young people or the education system what values they should emulate and they shouldn't. And you also do not like give people, and it's also less likely for them to commit the same mistakes these individuals have done in the past, which is the purpose of history. We tell you impact the individuals who need reparations the most. You impact the individuals who suffered from colonization the most under our side, which is precisely why you should vote Gov. Thanks.
I think PM for the final speech. Can I have the representation?
Hello, am I audible and visible? Sorry.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Just give me a moment. Sorry. Preferred pronouns are he, they. POIs through voice. And my name is Godefridus, but preferably just call me leader of opposition. Okay. Wait, sorry. Let me just set up my timer. Yeah. Stop. Oh, wait, sorry, my parents. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I'm back. Okay. Starting my speech in wait. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Exactly because of those tragedies, having multiple perspectives and multiple people as a part of them, we should ought discuss individuals, even those who were not exactly on the battlefront. Then, before anything, I just like to characterize a couple of things that LPM kind of missed. On heroization, we think it looks like two main things. First, often that these history classes tend to venerate them and discuss them a lot. But note that they still take into context their own position. Like how Melchora Aquino was like the ina ng KKK, Jose Rizal was the one writing and making the literature, and Andres Bonifacio was the one on the ground fighting for the KKK, and oftentimes those are equally discussed. But additionally, note that you can still discuss tragedies that are encompassed with this, which PM does not acknowledge. It's a fact that you can discuss things like the armed conflicts that happened in Bataan. For things like the KKK, for example, when they got shot, we don't understand why other like discussions of these heroes eclipse those issues. They have to prove that from DPM. But secondly, note that it's just that we tend to dedicate days to these people, that we teach a lot of things to these people, and we like prop them up. But yeah, that's a characterization. Then on to responses. Note that PM gave to you two main arguments. It's the first to say that you shift issues to important discussions in order to solve reparations. But note, this is exactly flipped by our side of the debate. Because of this, people need to be able to understand multiple problems and multiple parts of the issue. And you need previous examples to recognize these issues. Because note, in order to fix things like reparations, for example, the primary way that they were able to solve that was by using literature as a way to combat a lot of the forces, because physical harm wasn't enough already. Similar to how right now, often a lot of the time, media is the way that we're able to congregate and push back against a lot of these things, because we cannot physically fight against a lot of these issues. Government keeps assuming that everything that you do has to be made on physical fighting, change, and reparations. We don't understand why that solves their problem. The second thing that you mentioned is that you reinforce bad examples as role models. I'll integrate that response into my arguments. Then, two arguments. First, on why we empower more individuals to make change, and second argument as to why the process of heroization helps us better determine whether they're good or bad heroes. First argument, we think the importance of this is similar to like what government mentioned. We think that role models for impressionable individuals are very important because they shape our decisions. They shape the way that we like leaders and how we formulate ourselves as people. Three mechanisms then as to why we get better role models for these people. First, note that heroification distinctly allows us to see this, because without the ability to see heroification on government side, often you only hear about these individuals in passing. It's harder to credit a lot of these individuals because they don't have proper labels attached to them, and often a lot of the works that they wrote are harder to credit. So, for example, if they want to talk about like the discussions on how the El Filibustadismo or Noli Me Tangere was able to change the discussions of how we viewed the Filipino youth, that's a lot harder when you don't know who wrote it. When it's a lot harder to prove how credible it was and who like the background of the author who wrote it, which directly responds to PM's first argument. But second mechanism, and notice also responds to PM's second argument now, that it legitimizes the efforts of those who aren't radical. Note that PM has this assumption that often the only people who do contribute to a lot of these conflicts and the people who need to the role models they need to be physical. Why is that not the case? First, under this, it's because some people generally prefer not to be radical, but still want to help towards a lot of changes. It's a fact that, for example, like Melchora Aquino, she helped medically on the sidelines and helped aid the KKK, even though she wasn't directly involved in the fighting. She wasn't the one always being punished, and she wasn't the one that was always in the target of the Spanish individuals who came to colonize, but she still helped. But secondly, it's a fact that sometimes it's that people cannot afford or cannot choose to be radical in a lot of cases. In the past, in the context of the Philippine Revolution, it's people who were compromised and couldn't afford to because their own families were at stake, but they tried helping and providing little forms of aid, like providing food for other people. But secondly, often for the people who are perceived to be elites, for example, they are naturally born into privilege, but they still want to help fight against the problems of trying to liberate their own nation or liberating against colonization, because these people are still victim to a lot of the problems that they had to undergo, such as being forced to change your last name in the Philippines. It's the fact that you're still subject to the laws that the Spanish impose onto the Philippines that you cannot just go away from. And often these people still want to help. It's just that naturally speaking, they were born into a position where they had more privilege versus this. But third of all, notice all of this is important because exactly for the reasons that PM showed you is that there needs to be a counterbalancing narrative, because oftentimes there's a hyper glorification of warriors like Lapu-Lapu, of people, for example, who were very adamantly against and shot people and killed people, Andres Bonifacio, for example, because of the natural incentive for people to draw towards individuals who are individuals who did a lot of fighting because of its visceral reactions and visceral way it's written. Exactly why that's exactly why you need heroification to be able to glorify individuals who aren't seen in those fronts, who aren't going to be mentioned there. But third of all, note that it generally betters unification because the existence of multiple types of people who are and heroes on our side makes it so so that there is a common struggle, or there's a common individual identity that people who were from a colonized nation can experience. Because now people who came from underprivileged backgrounds, people who came from privileged backgrounds, have their own individual role models that also feel like they apply to them, instead of having these individuals who they particularly cannot relate to a lot of the time, because they simply were not in these circumstances that they are in right now, because government wants to restrict the people who are considered heroes. The impacts of this argument are threefold. First, that conflicts are better settled in these nations who came from colonization because there's a recognition of shared history and people choose to work together more. But secondly, it's a fact that communities are more willing to help one another because of the unified understanding that they came from similar backgrounds, that they also came from similar plights, and that there is intercollaboration and that they do need to help each other. But third, it's the fact that we get better leaders on our side because people have better role models, people have a more diverse understanding of what it means to be a good person, and generally people develop what it means to have a good role model better. Second argument on why the process of heroization becomes better and we help better determine what a good or bad hero is. The importance of this argument is twofold. First, it directly engages with the opening government when they say that these are bad role models. But secondly, note that the heroification is often a lot and should be good, and often it's a large part of the country's own identity and the way that you formulate it, and they play a large part in history. Then, two main mechanisms to why we're better able to heroify. First, it's because these people generally have legitimate reasons for why they got here. Note that government never, or prime minister never explains why these people are illegitimate ways, right? Maybe Jose Rizal did only write, quote unquote, the El Filibusterismo or Noli Me Tangere, but that interlapped and overlapped to other individuals who eventually wanted to change things, like the constitution for people like Apolinario Mabini, or people who were painters, or people who were generally revolutionists. So those things still trickle down, and often the reason why we consider them national heroes is because they have contributed in the past in the same way that maybe Andres Bonifacio was able to fight with the KKK in order to like gain Filipino independence. Note that this means that it like these people also have equal, if not more, ability to change people. Note that fighting isn't the only primary way you can make change. But second mechanism is that we question their actions more, which flips prime minister. Because now that they're in the spotlight, they become a point of discussion. And especially because of that, for people like Jose Rizal who are potentially sexist or potentially elitist, we discuss whether or not they deserve to be heroes, whether or not the things that they did actually contribute. They're the exact reason why debates like these exist to begin with. Absent that on government side, they're able to get away with a lot of the things that they do and not be held accountable because they never even discussed to begin with. They're never part of discussions surrounding heroes or influential individuals. The impact of this argument is twofold. First, we get better role models and better people in these positions of heroes. And secondly, we get more accountability for the issues and problems that these people may have potentially caused. And we get better people to be considered heroes. If you want a side where these people genuinely deserve to do this and people are better united, side of the opposition. Proud to oppose.
I think we have the opposition for the final speech. Can you have Kiki?
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Nice. Pronouns are she, her. POIs through chat, please. With that being said, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The heroization of elite figures in history led to the neglect of the people on the ground, the ignorance and the forgetfulness of the culture that the colonizers took from us. Opening government ensures that history does not repeat itself, and we are able to prove this to you in two ways. One, how is it that education in and of itself regarding the colonization era is much better over on opening government? Two reasons why this is true. One, education then is focused on the harms. For example, the vast amount of culture that was removed during the colonization period, because you aren't idolizing or you aren't putting a specific person, just one singular person, on a pedestal. There is much more focus on the actual history, on the actual context in which the colonization period took place instead of the person itself. But secondarily, why then does it have to be the people fighting on the ground that we have to talk about and that we have to like further in the education system? Because we have to understand that they were the people that experienced the horrors of the battlefield. They were the people whose homes were bombed, whose families were killed. They are the people who like when we discuss the lifestyle and the like way in which these people on the ground had to live through the colonization period, are we truly able to understand the grave harms that that our colonizers took from us? Why then that it cannot be these elite individuals, and why opposition simply cannot flag why in this debate, because I think opening opposition misses a key piece of framing or key wording in the motion, because we aren't just talking about the non-radicals, the people who just sat in their bed or in their table writing some letters or novels, but as also the rich ones. The fact that they were able to not be radical is due to their power and their money. Jose Rizal stayed abroad during the and most part of the colonization era. This is why he was able to have a progressive mindset and even write these novels in the first place, because he was being educated in a country because he was being educated and fed information that the people on the ground, that the people who are experiencing the crux of the battle aren't getting. The reason why these people chose to be the reason why people on the ground were radicals, had to fight in the battle, was not because they were violent. What is because they had no choice. What is because it was a live or die situation, and they couldn't just stay in their house to write novels, or else they will be killed on the spot. This is the exact reason why, even okay, we acknowledge that there might be some talk about the harms of the colonization period over an opposition, but you truly cannot get and understand and realize how grave the harms and that the battlefield or that the colonization period actually happened in countries like the Philippines. It is exactly because these people weren't able to live through these experiences. They weren't able to live through it. But secondarily, how does then the heroization of these elite individuals look like in status quo? We think that this is important to talk about, because it proves to you that you actually cannot really understand or learn about that the way in which the heroization of these elite individuals have manifested should be regrettable, because it has done more harm than good. We think then that they in status quo, they focus, instead of focusing on the effects or the context of the colonization period, they instead focus on studying the life of the individual and how we could be like them, how they're good role models. For example, this is me taking the example of closing opposition about how Gandhi was still how you're still able to understand the harms when you talk about Gandhi, and the main focus of people is that is how they're able to learn to be like him, is how they're able to take in his traits and add it to his lifestyle. It is people aren't talking about what happened during his time, but rather how they could be more like him. But to further give you an example, for example, in the Philippine curriculum, they give us 3 years 3 school years worth to analyze Jose Rizal's novels, but only 1 year talking about the entire colonization period. Which is why we tell you then that at the point in time in which you, in status quo, opposition cannot just simply come here into this debate to tell you that, oh, we're still able to talk about history and the harms, when that isn't how it is being manifested in status quo. For opposition to truly win in this debate, they should debate in the terms, they should look at this debate retrospectively into into how this has manifested in real life. But moreover then, to further how this is manifested in real life. But furthermore, I want to talk about then the arguments of opening opposition, because they tell us two things on two reasons why it is good under their side. One, you're able to get better role models, and two, why the process of heroization is better. On the first argument then, on how you get better role models, they try to prove this to you by saying that, oh, they're able to get recognition for these people that has done good, and these communities will start helping one another, and that these communities will start helping one another, and that you'll soon get reparations. Two responses under this. One, they do not provide us, or they do not really mechanize us why role models is the most important impact that we ought to talk about is in this debate, but rather we think that this is enough to push us over them, to push us over them. Why is this true? Because Ray told you, and this is our main case focus on being able to get reparations, on the entire country being able to be educated about all of the harms of the colonization period. What they get on opposition is better role models when there's already other aspects. For example, in public figures that we're able to get good role models, they do not prove the exclusivity why it has to be through why they have to take the trade-off of getting the reparations that you need just to get role models from Jose Rizal, for example. This proves to you that their impact is extremely small in this debate. But secondarily, on the second argument that they try to claim in this debate on why the process of heroization is better, they tell you that these people have legitimate reasons on why they chose to be non-radical, and that you're able to show people that violence is never the answer. I've already somewhat touched up on this a while ago, that the reason why these people like Jose Rizal was able to stay non-violent, that were able to sit on their chair and start writing on a piece of paper, is exactly because of the lifestyle and the opportunities that were extremely privileged and that were given to him. This that were given to him, this causes this false narrative and false notion towards the people on the ground that in times of battle, the people on the ground that do gives them a false impression, because let's face it, majority of the people on the ground, especially in times of war, do not have the privilege to just go fly to another country and relax while their citizens, or rather other civilians, are fighting with the colonizers. This is exactly why we don't think that this argument is even impactful to the ground, because for their process of heroization to actually fly and to actually be beneficial and impactful to the ground, they had to prove the importance of why it had to be these elite individuals, and why even if they already live vastly different lives from the people on the ground who truly experience all of the hardships and trauma of the wars and battles, that it has to be in these elite people to begin with. If you truly want a world in which countries are able to get the reparations that you need, then it is a clear win from opening government. Thank you.
I think DPM for the final speech. Can I have the other one?
Hi, I'm Iacobus with an I articularized to through voice. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I don't think OG ever really understands the true complexity of our case and what it means to actually heroize. Before I go on, one piece of housekeeping. Take note, Chair, that the process of heroization and to be able to talk about it in schools and etc. is what is the prerequisite for that to happen in the first place, is to be able to also discuss these struggles. The reason for this is because in order to truly appreciate the heroization of, for instance, of Jose Rizal or Yong Dong-ju, you need to be able to recognize what necessarily happened in the past. So it's for instances in the Bataan Death March, we're able to recognize the torture, the torture that Filipinos went through because of the Japanese occupation and all this type of stuff. You still need to be able to explore that. It's a matter of weighing them. With that, then responses onto OG. The first thing that I want to respond to is their claim that says, when you idolize this, you're going to brainwash children and you're not going to let them see the true horrors of colonization. One, this was already a preempted coming from Joff and was already addressed in the housekeeping. But two, we flipped this immediately coming from Godefridus, because we explained to you that the idolization or the heroization of these heroes is what allows children to recognize that they can play a role, that they can help stop the suffering of the Filipino of their community. It's for instance of helping evolve the national language after being occupied after being colonized. It's the fact that you're able to medically help people of your community after being brutally tortured, after being stepped on, after brutally beaten upon by other colonial masters. We think this is the only way in which people are going to be encouraged with. The second thing that I want to respond to then is that they have bad role models on our side of the house. I have three responses to this. The first is that we flip this directly, right? Like we explained to you that the process of heroization is what allows us to truly shed light upon them, but whether or not they truly deserve to be heroized. So Jose Rizal was a sexist, but the justification and the decision making and the discourse that's currently happening within status quo is whether or not we should still heroize him because of the actions that he's done in the past, whether it be sexist or whether it be helping the Filipinos. That's why you're able to shed light towards these role models and shedding awareness towards the types of bad actions that they might have done. But the second thing is that no, it's not a false impression as to what DPM wants to push, right? It's not a false impression. We tell them for individuals who are looking at these people as role models is that they can do things that are based on their circumstances or based on the capacity to do so. So for instance, if I am a lower class individual within the Philippines, my role as a Filipino isn't necessarily to just go immediately out of war, right? It can be as simple as helping people of your community, trying to promote the national language after English has been predominantly occupying the country. It's all of those reasons what allows people to be able to do stuff based on their capacity. It doesn't force them to just go out of war immediately and etc. Then we think if that it's a substantive case is done. But secondly, onto engagement towards DPM, because DPM says a lot of stuff. The first thing that DPM says is that rich people are being heroized and that's bad. Two responses. The first is that we utilize this, right? Insofar as elite individuals like Jose Rizal was being like honorized, it signals to people who are also of the elite class and status quo to do the same as well, because there's an active pressure that they need to also that they need to be able to help the Filipino community as well, that they need to also show themselves and use their resources to be able to fully capitalize on it and be able to help the Filipinos. But secondly, note that it's intersectionality. So sure, if for instance Jose Rizal was super rich and I'm not necessarily like closely related to him, I'm still able to experience the same amount of harms that he probably experienced as well, right? The fact that we have Spanish last names as Filipinos, for instance, the fact that we're still like affected by colonial bias and all those types of stuff is what allows us to be able to truly connect with one another and unite with one another. But then I want to go into some three forms of weighing, because on OG they can counter-assert a bunch of reasons as to why you're not going to be able to shed the true light of colonialism. But on our side, we can also try to counter-assert a lot of reasons as to why people can be unified. What matters now here is the weighing in which side wins. We have three forms of weighing. The first is that things like class disparity, things like effects of colonialism, was a result of the like lack of unification within the community as a whole. The reason for this is because the fact that the people aren't probably going to be unified on their side of the house when they don't have a leader to go to rally under, when they can't agree upon like which specific like person properly helped towards their own community when the Spanish colonization came, is what allows for individuals to not be able to have is what allows for more discrimination, allows for more class disparity to arise on government side. But on our side of the house, it unifies everyone, given that the message of the leader and the heroization of this specific public figure is what unifies people that say, hey, we are all part of this single identity. We need to be able to help each other with the capacity and the resources that we have. We need to. The second forms of weighing then is that it unifies tribes, provinces, towns, and even communities, because they're currently being discriminated by the colonial bias that exists within status quo. The way that we challenge that is we continue it with the heroization of heroes. And here's where I want to add my extensive material, where it's the fact that the heroization of these public figures is what tells you that the fight isn't over yet, that you still need to keep on fighting. It's the reason for this is because, for instances in like heroes of Jose Rizal, when he died, the message wasn't, oh, it ends there. The message was, you still have to keep on fighting. You still have to keep on fighting your colonial bias and etc. It's what unifies these people. But the third form of weighing is the weighing in timeline. Note that we'd rather prioritize the unification of people currently right now because they are currently suffering in terms of the quantity of people being alive, but it's the fact that we're more proximate towards them as well. So they are currently suffering under the colonial bias. Things like being treated as lower class because they're speaking the national language. We need to be able to unify them and go against the colonial bias that exists within status quo. With that, then extension. Why the heroization is what tackles colonial bias and elitism. This engages with the PM and OG frame that says that people can't recognize the colonial bias. The problem on their side of the house is that without any sort of heroization, without any sort of emphasis towards a specific leader, the message or the ideal message within educational like schools are just seemingly that the solution for this is unsolvable, where there might have been figures, but they weren't that influential, which greatly gives lots of despair towards individuals of the now, saying that they can't properly solve the colonial bias that they have right now, given that they aren't able to properly recognize whether or not they should keep on fighting because there is no clear message coming from their side of the house. On the other side of the house, with the public figures being heroized, you're able to finally tackle colonial biases, because these heroes and these public figures, when in history, when they tackled upon whatever occupied them, so for instance the Japanese or the Americans, there was always a message of you have to keep on fighting, that it doesn't end from here. Like after you like throw the Spanish away from your homeland, you still need to be able to implement a proper government facility. You still need to be able to unify the Filipinos and etc. For all those reasons, then we think we are the only side to be able to tackle colonialism at its roots and be able to get rid of the colonial bias that exists within status quo. Very proud to oppose.
Are there any speaker can have minority thoughts?
I'd like to confirm if I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
Pronoun she, her, POIC voice, preferably during the fifth minute. Starting my speech. Wait, give me a few seconds to fix my timer and drink water. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Panel, if opening opposition wants to talk about, I don't know, like the mitigation of colonialism or something, we think then that the heroization has actually done more harm than good for like literally like, I don't know, like mitigating colonialism as like a whole then. So what did opening opposition give to you, right? They told us like, firstly, how like with heroization, there's becoming like there's a shift in the issues and like people get role models that actually shape their decisions. Like they get like no, without heroization, it's going to be hard to get it. We tell you that the harm on their world is that because they are role models, because they're like there's heroizations and all those things, recognize that at the end of the day, these heroes are literally elites. They aren't able to fully contextualize the people who are on the ground. The harm is that because heroes like these exist, there's a huge gaps from the solution that they create. They don't fully understand the experiences. They aren't able to like fully understand the nuance of like what are the like difficulties that these people on the ground are like suffering then, right? Second, they also told us how there's going to be better unification on our side because there's like common identity and individuality. They're able to understand struggles and whatnot. I think that it's funny that opposition wants people to be more unified without taking into account that these heroes probably don't have the same experiences of, I don't know, those who become like slaves or like those who face the wrath of the Spaniards. Because I think it's important to recognize that with the colonialism aspects of like these heroes, it's important to point out that these heroes, like, I don't know, like let's take for example Jose Rizal. He studied in like a different country. He has like a different understanding of our world, of like Philippines as a whole, because like he was exposed to like different narratives, like different like Western narratives, European narratives that isn't able to fully encompass these struggles of the Filipino
POI.
people. Okay, moving on to like government, opening government, right? Opening government talks about the repercussions of the countries and all those things. They also talk about how they're able to like understand the repercussions and like talk about the harms of the country. So how will CG enter this debate then? CG will come into this debate telling how nation building is going to be better off on our side, and how nation building and having a sense of patriotism and nationalism is actually going to be something that's the prerequisite to economic activity. Why? This is the missing link to opening government's case, and we tell you that the opposition, you can get the benefits of economic like boosting, because literally they live in you can literally see like in status quo, like these post-colonial states aren't able to uplift themselves, aren't able to like give importance to the products that they have because of this colonial mindset. This leads me to my first argument: how nation building is going to be better off on our side. Because what's the problem? Having heroes who are like elites and all don't encompass the narrative of the people on the ground.
POI.
Look, for example, like Rizal, who studied in different countries, interacted with lots of people from different countries. This means that his ideologies or beliefs are more nuanced to the colonizers. This means that even if like he has an idea of the struggles of the Filipino people, or even if he has that understanding of what experiences the Filipino people struggle with through the hands of the Spaniards, we think that he isn't able to fully understand. He isn't able to fully like contextualize the solution that's actually going to like cater to the needs of these people in the first place. Because we tell you that we tell you that nation building, we tell you then that like because of this, right, what's going to happen then is that like nation building is going to be unlikely. Because why? People are going to probably value the advocacy of these like elite heroes. They probably are going to glorify them. We think that the glorification is something that's going to be bad for them in the long run, because when they give importance to like these colonial ideologies that these elites have, given the fact that they're probably from like different like spectrums of
POI.
like economic activity, that we think that this is something that's going to be like harmful in their side of the house. Because recognize that at the end of the day, these heroes, these elites, they don't understand what's happening. Even if they do, they don't fully recognize the different sides, the diverse experiences of these people. Because what happens when you regret idealization, right? That's the counterfactual. This looks like people actually having a stronger sense of nationalism and patriotism. We're able to move on from the shackles of colonialism, because at least on our side, let's say we have like, I don't know, heroes like Andres Bonifacio actually pushing for revolutions that actually cater to the needs of the Filipino people, that actually cater to like the different
POI.
like situations that these people have. We tell you that this is something that's going to to be better off in our world because we're able to like escape colonialism in a sense, as we actually have like a grassroots perspective of what is happening on the ground then, right? In a world where we prefer non-elites, it encourages people on the ground to actually strive for more opportunities and have a stronger sense of nationalism that is proximate to the culture of the country. What we tell you, because of like because of like the heroization of these elites, we tell you that this only propagates like the post-colonial mentality, which is essentially crab mentality. You like put these like you put the colonial ideologies, you put colonial products like over your own culture. What happens then is that essentially affects how these people perceive their own country. There's no great importance. Therefore, their economic activity as a post-colonial country is literally squashed because there's literally like no like incentive for you to actually cater to the products of your country. Recognize that as a post-colonial state, we're more likely to be in lower positions. Therefore,
POI.
it's important for us to actually have a stronger sense of nationalism and patriotism, because through this, we're actually able to uplift ourselves from like the effects of like being a post-colonial state in the first place. Because what do we get then? At government side, right? We get a booming economy because you're able to see the importance of, I don't know, like inherently like consuming local goods and all those things. We think that because the heroization has led to like false narratives or false hopes for people to
POI.
actually idolize the very people who literally colonized your country. We think then in the long run, and we think then on the long term, this is actually something that's going to be better for the post-colonial states. On a magnitude, this is something that's going to benefit them, because on our side of the house, at least we're actually able to cater to the people. We're actually able to make solutions that's nuanced to the people. It's something that you cannot get on government side of the house. For all those reasons, proud to propose. Proud to oppose. Thanks.
I think the speaker can have member of population.
Yeah, give me like 15 seconds. Right. I hope I'm clearly visible and audible.
Yes, you are.
All right. I'll take my POIs verbally, and I'll begin on the reverse count of 3, 2, 1. 3 layers of framing for you to just start this debate, right, and give you what our stance is on closing opposition. Firstly, I don't see why heroization is a zero-sum game, which is what Opening House builds its entire case on the basis of. I don't see why it's necessarily true that when I'm heroizing X, I am not capable of heroizing Y. I think this indirectly completely takes on the premise that OG's case and CG's case is built on. Why is this true? Two things under this. Firstly, understand that I am able to heroize multiple different groups in society at one particular point in time. What does that mean? At the same time, while I'm going to be highlighting people who directly engage in the physical struggles in the form of actually fighting on a ground level and pushing for independence from a colonial oppressor, in that way, it's also possible for me to simultaneously heroize people who contributed in the form of writing literature that directly inspires thousands of millions of people to directly join a movement and therefore contribute to colonialism in that form. So first layer of framing tells you that there's no reason for exclusivity to be true when you're talking about who all you're capable of heroizing. Secondly, why is heroization of anybody important? It does two things for you. Firstly, it contributes to a better sense of national identity insofar as we're going to be framing to you why national identity is better on our side of the house and telling you the point of difference from what you get from our opening house. And then secondly, it allows for there to be some amount of accountability and some amount of recognition of people who make active sacrifices in order to work towards a greater good, which is a crucial part of national identity and a crucial part of a nation's development. And therefore, we'll also be proving to you how on a principal level, we're able to make sure that people who actively contribute to the independence movement are able to receive sufficient recognition. First argument then, right, firstly, right, I'm going to tell you, operating on our absolute worst case scenario, conceding to the under mechanized and low impact arguments you get from OG, why even if you buy into the idea that OG's argumentation is relevant in this debate, none of it is exclusive. Our opening half tries to directly respond to this, but we're going to tell you why we achieve all of it only on closing off, and therefore it should be credited to us. OG gives you three things, panel. Firstly, they talk about a better and undiluted coverage of like colonial issues, and as a result, you've got more awareness coming in on their side of the house. We've got two layers of response and how this is better on our side of the house. One, when the works of these non-radical elite anti-colonial figures predominantly discuss the colonial history at that point in time and their unique perception of the way in which colonial oppressors are directly causing harms to the people who are living within a particular community. One, this is the only form of documentation that exists from the perspective of anybody other than the colonizer at this particular point in time. So one, this allows for you to get a unique perspective of the actual magnitude of colonial exploitation. It is good on the level that even in case the other side wants to push, that you do teach stuff like colonial history within the school environment, which directly enables you to be able to get any amount of change or any amount of recognition. That is better facilitated when there's enough text to give a neutral third-party point of view or a point of view that supports the anti-colonial movement, and therefore you're able to get better coverage on our side of the house. This is likely to be undiluted as well. But then secondly, they just try to go ahead and tell you, okay, everything the elite says is at all points in time going to be bad because they're not going to be the ones who are fighting on a ground level. Absolutely, we concede to the fact that they're not fighting on a ground level. I still don't see why that directly translates into bad, because even if we concede they have different types of experiences to the people who might be indulged in the physical fighting, the types of experiences that they have associated with the type of privilege they have access to means their ability to convey information about this particular point in time, which is unlikely to be favorable to the colonizers, insofar as the reason that these people are heroized is because they are a part of the anti-colonial movement in some sense, means that to some extent, it's still an overall net good for the movement and for the ability of a nation to gain independence, and therefore it's still deserving of heroization. Secondly, they come and tell you better reparations. Naturally, we don't get any mechanization for this, but I think the only way in which you're capable of using stuff like call-out mechanisms historically or retrospectively in order to get better reparations is in case you have sufficient coverage from any point of view other than the colonizer to be able to ensure that there's call-out mechanisms or that there's a better sense of national unity that's multifaceted, which actually allows for people to come together and lobby against nations who are historical colonizers for you to be able to get reparations. Both of those things you exclusively get on closing opposition. And then thirdly, the idea of better historical call-out existing where the elites do certain bad things, and as a result of that, those things just simply don't end up being covered when you heroize them. One, I don't see why this is exclusive. Insofar as you're still going to be heroizing people who are active fighters within these types of wars against colonial oppressors, I still think that there's a large number of people, if you were to buy into the mechanization of opening government and closing government, who are not called out. But then secondly, when I heroize somebody, there's more media coverage of them. When there's more media coverage of somebody, a lot of the media coverage will be focused on positive aspects. A certain part of that media coverage will be focused on negative aspects such as criticisms, because people have incentives in societies to also introduce other points of view insofar as that's something that's seen as controversial or that's something that will directly benefit the people who are directly calling this out. So it's still possible for you to get historical call out. Why am I telling you this? It means all of the contributions you get from OG are not only non-existent, so we do better engagement than an opening half does, but secondly, it can be credited to a closing opposition. And then second argumentation, right, on how you're able to principally recognize the contribution of these people who have made active sacrifices. Understand that insofar as we frame for you, the reason that heroization is important is because it allows for people to be recognized for their contributions to an overall net good within society. These people, even if they are part of the elite, are the ones who directly write the text that inspire for any form of violent movement to be able to come together and unite. Because look at the absence of these texts existing, right? Say you do not have these people existing anymore, and therefore the movement is entirely dependent on people who are not part of the elite. One, it lacks the ability to unite. Two, it lacks the ability to be funded. Insofar as that's true, I don't see how you get independence from colonizers on their side before moving on a POI. 3, 2, 1. Seeing nothing then, right? Finally, understand the idea of counter narratives, which is to say that insofar as a lot of the existing narratives in society are talking to me about how, like, it's only the people who are on a ground level who contributed to the ability of a nation to be able to get independence from a colonial oppressor. This simply acts as a counter narrative insofar as I'm now also talking about the extent to which people who are non-radical and elite were also able to add meaningful contributions. Insofar as this is a retrospective debate, the other side needs to be able to come and tell you why this is a categorically bad thing. All they do is tell you it's not necessarily a good thing. One, we're able to prove marginal benefit insofar as it's principal good to recognize the sacrifices of these people. And no, they do make concrete sacrifices insofar as people like Jose Rizal end up losing their life and are killed by the Spanish for the types of oppression for the types of contributions they have to the overall movement. Final impact statement, and as to what you're able to exclusively get from CO in this debate, which you don't get from any other side. Firstly, we're able to flip all of the argumentation on OG. So one, you get a better coverage on CO. Secondly, you get better reparations on CO. Thirdly, you get better historical call out in CO. Fourthly, you're able to ensure you get a principal good on CO. And fifthly, we're still able to prove through the idea of counter narratives, you got a better sense of national identity that's multifaceted exclusively on CO. We take over OG, we take over OO, and we take over CG.
I to move the opposition for the final speech. Can I have Gabriel?
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, so UIs through chat. I'll tell you and I'll take up UI. I'll just set up my timer and drink water. Okay, so I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The world without the heroization of non-radical and elites is a world with more patriotism, a stronger sense of nationalism that helps society move on from the shackles of colonization. 3 things I'll do in my speech. Firstly, I'll clarify the debate and take out CO because their case was minimal and shallow at best. Then I'll take on their opening counterpart, and then lastly, I'll take on why we win over our opening and the exclusive benefits you get from CG. Firstly, what this debate so far has lacked is an analysis on what actually happened towards the internalizations of the heroizations for the poor and privileged in status quo. The reason why that happened is that they continuously assert that the prerequisite to decolonization is having a hero on the forefront of your country. Firstly, let's take out CO because they had a very shallow case that basically just came from their OO. Firstly, they said that they can heroize different groups of people. Sure, you can give them the proper recognition, but the thing is, when you heroize them, you also get the trickle down effect on the people that are suffering on the ground. That is so harmful because instead of focusing on the nationalism at hand, you overburden the people on the ground. Integrated with their closing counterpart is their OO when they said that they get they get better models. One, their first reason for this is the heroification attaches their works to them, and two, it legitimizes the non-radical people because people cannot afford to be radical because they are again elites born into money but still want to help. This is exactly the reason why their mechanisms do not work. It's because it sets a precedence that the less privileged cannot engage in, like, writing a book or helping indirectly because you put the people of poverty and privilege
POI.
in echo chambers where you separate them both. You separate what they can do specifically. You cannot say that in status quo, the only precedence you set is that, oh, the elites can only be in the back lines and the poor will always be in the front lines because they should sacrifice their lives like what these heroes do. Secondly, they say that they can delineate the good from the bad because one, there are legitimate reasons why they got there, and two, there are more discussions, meaning there is more accountability. This benefit is one, simply symmetrical, but is better on CG. One, because we don't overshadow the narratives of other people on the ground. Which leads to two, we are more adaptive to the actual societal issues right now. Because sure, you
POI.
can paint a good I said through chat. Because sure, you can paint a good picture of what those heroes did in the past, but insofar as you can't make that manifest into like actual good things that they can adapt to in the present. One that like a poor, less privileged individual can do in the present, or one that like a rich CEO can do in the present, then there is no logical link to why the benefits of of having that hero will manifest in status quo. Next, they also said that because what the elites look from these role models are the tools and weapons that they use the same way to manipulate the underprivileged. This is so bad because in comparison to our side, the world you operate in is still a pro-elite world, a pro-colonialistic world. There is no direct link between being privileged and magically wanting to help your country. Insofar as the world you proliferate is one that has lacking nationalism, you just give a reason for these privileged people to not care at all. For the sole reason that there are a lot of other rich people that can help. Oh, there can be like more heroistic people that are privileged at this time. So I don't need to help these underprivileged people at all. I can just go to a different country, manifest my business, and make myself richer at the end of the day. Quickly on their extension, where they say that they tackle colonial bias, but their only mechanism for this is that the heroes give the message of the fight not ending. This backfires on them because note that the moment you award these over glorifications of the elites is also the moment you proliferate complacency and stagnancy. OO is out. It is only on our side to cater to the proximate incentives of nation building and actually cater to progressing our post-colonial state. Because the only thing you see when you push those heroes are the complacency measures that the post-colonial states cling to. So only on CG do you get the urgency for people who are suffering now. Before I continue, POI from opening.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, this closing exchange cannot just be opening exchange version 0.1. What's the delineation for both?
The delineation from both is that we don't just merely focus on like the heroes that you provide. The only clash on your side is that these glorifications of heroes are good. Glorifications of heroes are bad. We actually take into account the internalizations of the people on the ground, how it affects them, how it affects the poor, the underprivileged, and the privileged at the end of the day. We tackle the harms that has caused the privileged people in our time today to actually not care about the underprivileged people because of the same mechanism of this heroification. Now, why do we win over opening? One, because they focus on the flaws of these heroes, but fail to mechanize how merely damaging the name of one hero will then lead to decolonization or the abundance of preparations they propose. The exclusive benefit and analysis you get at CG is that one, it is the internalization of these people that has led to the colonial mentality that is exacerbated on opposition side, and that is the most important. Just note that this is a retrospective debate. You cannot just battle on like uh these heroification as good or bad. You need to actually take into account what has happened in history, because note that it what actually happened in history, it has set a standard that the vulnerable people can't relate to. The privileged is continuously praised for the things they can do, but while the underprivileged is then left on the ground without the opportunity or the capability to do the same things as their privileged counterparts. This often led to the overshadowing of other more radical figures like Andres Bonifacio, for example, who is seen at times as less of a man because he engaged in more radical forms of fighting back. It has also led to the oppressed to be more oppressed because the impact on the privileged people now is them idolizing the colonial countries and merely adapting to their ideologies. This doesn't solve the problem of decolonization. This doesn't give solvency to any issue on opposition. For all those reasons and more, very proud to propose. Thanks.
Item the speaker, can I have a please?
Yeah, I hope I'm clearly audible.
Yes, you are.
All right. Just give me a second to set up the timer. Cool. POIs verbally, please. I won't be checking chat during the course of my speech. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Two things in this speech. First, responding to all the benches, and second, weighing against our opening. Firstly, in terms of responses. First, OG. I want to clarify two things in the setup. One, they still glorify radical elites. And second, heroization doesn't mean that you ignore every single bad thing a leader has done. Why is this? Because to heroize them in the first place, you need to do things like acknowledge their faults because the spotlight is on them and you don't want a national hero to be someone with so many faults. But second, if they have faults, you do things like acknowledge them, right? This looks like Ashoka in India, who was a ruthless ruler, but then converted to Buddhism and is now heroized for that very decision. But second, in terms of the counter model of just focusing on flaws, and I quote, they literally just said focusing on flaws. This means they won't focus on the good at all. I think our principle takes this out sufficiently when we told you the need for glorification in the first place of these people. But second, on this claim about accountability, right? And I want to flip this because the whole case which is based on accountability, but the issue is it's symmetric, right? Due to the massive amounts of heroism associated, you're going to then be very shocked when you find when you even find out one fault. That is when you get accountability on those faults and discourse over their faults. On the comparative, however, with that model about focusing on faults, you crowd out every single good thing the person did and pounce on those flaws. We think heroes are multi-dimensional human beings. They obviously have flaws, but they also have good things. You get both on our side of the house. But second, in terms of perception, they said people are more happier to demand the reparations they need. But I'm unclear as to what the mech is here, right? Like, even if you portray this figure as bad, you don't suddenly get reparations. It's not like your colonizer feels pity for you, right? And I want to be clear, on their side of the house, they still heroize radical individuals. These are the kinds of individuals who are most likely to already be glorified significantly. So all of their harms are symmetric, except it's a lot worse because the most radical are the kinds of people on the battlefield, the kinds of people who are at the forefront because they were so radical, the kinds of people who are already getting glorification. So the unique harm that they have on their side is for these non-radicals on the sideline. Non-elites become a wash. But then they talk about how elite glorification unholds because on their side they still have radical elites being glorified. Like they don't really solve any of their issues. And third, we think if you're really not focusing on any good, your education system will also probably be bad if they want to talk about that. But even if we bite the bullet and say that we only show elite people, the difference then is that on the government bench they only show radical elites. On our side, we show both non-radical, radical, unseen elites. On weighing a scale and vulnerability, then we win on this because both sides can show non-elite. So that becomes a wash. This is the break of the deadlock that uniquely comes out in CEO. This is what rules the government bench, both CG and OG out of this debate at the forefront. But now let's look at CG. What does CG give us? They give us this absolutely far-fetched extension about how they're going to benefit the economy and have nation building. Because having heroes who are elitist and don't have opinions of the people on the ground, which means you can't think of a solution that caters to their needs. This was their line of reasoning. But this isn't a struggle of colonialism. It's a THR motion. So we think stealing, etc. would happen anyways. But second, these elite non-radicals just want to get freedom, which bleeds into benefiting the common people. Like during the struggle, you want freedom. So the different types of priorities that say people on the ground have or elites have are mostly the same because you're literally being colonized. You just want to be free. That's going to solve all of your problems. The elite have the ability to do that. That's why they do that. That's why the people on the ground feel a lot better because they have the freedom. But let's look at the responses they gave us. They said when you heroize them, you get a trickle down effect of focusing on the ground. This is bizarre, right? We proved to you why you're able to heroize everyone on our side, the educated, the warriors, the common people. But their model can't just be like, oh, we don't heroize anyone because it's a THR motion. They don't have PR. But what is the solvency on their side? Because the narratives of people on the ground simply cannot be propagated to the same extent when there's a lack of information pertaining to it in the first place. Third thing, then let's weigh over OO. OO's main push was better role models. Two pieces of weighing here. First, logically prior to this argument, you need to prove why it's principally legitimate to glorify these non-radical sideline people in the first place, something that CEO uniquely gives you. But second, they needed to clarify that on government side, the radicals are the only ones who are glorified. Second claim in terms of intercollaboration and unification, I don't think this really works insofar as patriotism is symmetric with any figure that is glorified. I think you still understand your parts better insofar as elite people are anyway spoken about. So heroization makes a very marginal difference to this collaboration. So on impact, this is like really marginal and ways off. But second, in terms of better heroism, I think there were two things missing here. First is how this narrative plays out in the real world to ground it. That is to say that currently there's an over glorification on things like violence, and to break that stereotype, non-radical figures need to be heroized. But second, the flip to accountability that I gave you in the in the beginning. But third, I think OO was a little too utopic when they didn't look at the word elite, and OG points it out. And we're the only side then who broke that deadlock in terms of the elite and told you why the non-elite becomes a wash. This is really crucial to note. But this is another point independent of our extensions, where we're the only side that tells you we're better off for people who aren't elite. Because when elite people on the sidelines are pointed out, it also throws light upon their supporters and say the unseen heroes who helped them, since they were an unseen hero as well. But second, you still have things like glorification of the non-elite on both sides of the house. It becomes a wash. I don't get how this stands. But the response here was just, oh, it signals to elite people to do the same thing. That was their response. But on weighing, this is highly speculative, since rich people have their own incentives of earning money, but the circumstances are just inherently different now. But third, in terms of heroization tackling colonial bias, they said without this, the message in schools is that the solution is unsolvable, which says that you can't solve colonial bias, whether or not they should keep fighting. I think the issue here is that you still have radical figures being glorified, so the impact of this is really marginal. What changes then is the principle and the counter narratives that we give you. So the extension just doesn't stand since it becomes symmetric, because you still have inspiration from, say, radical figures being glorified on their side of the house. But I want to weigh the extensions we gave you now. We gave you three extensions. First, on principle, on weighing this is logically prior to anything the opening house said. If no impact stand in this debate, the principle does. We told you why heroism in and of itself is legitimate. That is the base that they need to prove for any of the impacts to stand in the first place. But second, in terms of counter narratives of radicals and non-radicals, how it's so important to have this. But thirdly, in terms of national identity, on the scale of impact, and on depth of impact, impacting so many people and bringing the nation together. Incredibly proud to oppose.
I am the speaker for the debate, and I think it was for a very good debate. And I think it's all for the round. Biscocho for the Brittle and my panel, you guys can join me in room 5, probably. You can deliberate.